Merry Christmas everybody, welcome to Seasick Pirate Studios. Curtis here again with another how-to painting tutorial. And in this festive episode, we're going to be painting the Red Gobbo. So grab yourself a mince pie, grab your paints and your brushes, and let's get started. So we've undercoated him with Corax white spray, and the first step we're going to take is painting the flesh. So we're going to give it a base of Waaagh flesh. We're then going to give it a shade of Athonian camoshade. We're then going to paint the raised areas with Warboss green. We're going to give them a first highlight of Skarsnick green, and then we're going to finish off the highlights on the very edges with Kislev flesh. So I've got my Army Painter Regiment brush here, and I've got some Waaagh flesh on our palette. We're just going to load up our brush there, not too much, and we're just going to apply the green all over the flesh. Now you want to be very careful not to get any on the beard, because we're going to be painting that white. And green on white is a very difficult colour to clean up. So after two thin layers of Waaagh flesh, we've got a good foundation to build upon. So now we're going to give the skin areas a wash with Athonian camoshade. So we're going to load our brush up, and we're just going to paint this all over the flesh areas. So now that our shade of Athonian camoshade has dried, what we're going to do now is get some Warboss green onto our fine detail brush, and we're going to paint all of the raised areas on the face. So I'm going to do the chin, just making sure I leave that dark recess where the shade is sitting. Also going to paint the hands. All the fingers. So now that our layer of Warboss green has dried, we're going to highlight it with Skarsnick green. So we just need a tiny bit on the end of our detail brush, and we're just looking to pick out all of these edges just here. And for the last step on the flesh, we're just going to get some Kislev flesh, mix it in with our Skarsnick green, just to get a nice greenish flesh tone that we can use just to do spot highlights on the edge of all of the raised areas. So it seems like a nice green to me. So what we're going to do is just pop touches right on the edges of the raised areas. So after all of those highlights on the skin, the face, the hands and the legs are all complete. So now what we're going to be focusing on is the lining of his coat, all the fur trims around the sleeves, on the hat and the little bobble on the end. So we're going to give those a coat of grey seer for a start. Then we're going to cover those areas with contrast Apothecary white, and then we're going to give them a dry brush of Corax white. So get some grey seer onto your palette and just water that down so you've got a nice smooth texture to it. And what we want to do is just paint the inside of the coat just like that. So now all those grey seer areas are dry, what we're going to be doing now is covering those areas with Apothecary white. So I've got some onto our palette just here. Don't get too much on your brush because you want to be careful not to catch any of the flesh that we've painted. What you want to do is just layer this over the top, just like that. So now that all the Apothecary white is dried, we're just going to finish those areas off with some Corax white. Now what you want to do is switch to your small dry brush, just get some on the end of your bristles, and what you want to do is just scrub it off with a piece of kitchen towel. And what we're looking to do is just drag this over all of those areas just to give a highlight to all of those raised bits there. Now just be very careful not to get any on the skin. It's only a soft dry brush, this one. All over the lapels as well. We're going to go over the beard. A glorious beard it is too. And then we're going to go over the hat as well. Just be careful not to get any on the end of those ears. So now we've finished the lining of the inside of the coat, we're going to be focusing on the outside of the coat. So the Red Gobbo wouldn't be the Red Gobbo without a red coat. So we're going to base it with Mephiston red. We're then going to give it a wash with contrast flesh tearers red. We're then going to give it a highlight of Mephiston red. And then we're going to give it a fine highlight of sunz scarlet. So we've got some Mephiston red on our palette. I've watered it down. Now I'm switching back to our regiment brush here. Just want to get some on the end of your brush. And we just want to paint this all over nice and smooth. Now you may need a couple of coats of this. And you want to watch out where the lining of the coat joins the outside. So you just want to take your time. Just paint around the outside of those edges. So after two thin layers of Mephiston red, we're ready for our wash of flesh terror contrast. So get some on your palette, load your brush up, and what you want to do is just pick out these in panels. So I'm going to work on this one first. Make sure I get the paint nice and smooth. Now we want to watch for pooling and make sure this doesn't dry all streaky. So just paint this all over the jacket. Just be careful around those white parts, because you don't want to contaminate the white. We're now going to finish the coat off by doing the highlight of sunz scarlet. So you want a fine point on your brush, not too much on there as well. Just gonna drag that along those lines that we did earlier on. So now that all our highlights have dried all over the jacket, that's now complete. So for the next step, we're going to be focusing on all the black areas, like his boots, his belt buckle, and the bandolier that he's wearing across his chest. So we're going to be base coating those with Abaddon black. We're then going to give them a highlight of Eshin grey, and then we're going to give them an extreme highlight of Administratum grey. So we've got some black on our palette already. I've watered this down. All you need to do is just get some on the end of your brush, and we're just going to paint the boots. So now that highlight of Eshin Grey has dried, we're going to be giving it a final highlight with Administratum Grey. So just get some on the end of your brush. What you want to do is pick out those lines that you did with Eshin Grey and just subtly do an extreme highlight with the Administratum Grey. So after that highlight of Administratum Grey, the boots, the belt buckle and the bandolier are all complete. So for the next part we're going to be painting all the metals. Now I've gone round the model and I've blacked in all the areas that we need to paint metals. So like the gun, his goggles, all these parts on the ammunition crates that he's standing on, and all the grenades and the sack at the back. So we're going to be painting our metals with Leadbelcher. We're then going to give them a wash of Nuln oil, and we're then going to give them a highlight of Ironbreaker. So we've got some Leadbelcher on our palette, and we're just going to get some on the end of our brush. I've watered this down a little bit just so we've got a nice smooth consistency to it, and what we're going to do is just paint all of those areas that we blacked in. So now that all the Leadbelcher is dried, we're just going to cover up those areas with some Nuln oil. So we're just going to get some Nuln oil onto our brush and just apply that all over those areas, just to get some definition. So now the Nuln oil wash is dried, what we're going to do is get some Ironbreaker, and we're just going to highlight all those areas. So we're just going to get some on our brush, not too much. And what you want to do is just drag this down the edges of all those metal areas, just to give them a highlight. So now all the highlights have dried on our metals, we're going to be working on the stick in his hand, just here. So we're going to use Wyldwood as a base, and then we're going to highlight it with Baneblade Brown. So I've got some Wyldwood on our palette just here. Just going to get some onto the brush, and we're going to paint that on just like that. Now with all contrast paints, just make sure you watch out for pooling, and make sure when you're applying it to an area that you cover the entire area with one coat, because we don't want it to dry all streaky. So now the Wyldwood has dried, we're going to get some Baneblade Brown onto our detail brush, and we're just going to highlight all the edges. Put a couple of lines in there as well. So now the Baneblade Brown has dried on top of the Wyldwood, we're going to be focusing on all the gold areas of the model. So we're going to be painting the star, the baubles, the star on his hat and the one on his belt buckle. So for the stars, we're going to be painting them with Retributor armour. We're then going to be giving them a wash with Reikland fleshshade gloss. We're then going to layer them up with Liberator gold, and then we're going to give them a highlight of Stormhost silver. And for the baubles, what we're going to be doing is painting them with Retributor armour, and then we're going to be painting contrast Blood Angel red over one of the baubles, and we're going to be painting contrast orc flesh on top of the other one. So on top of the gold, the contrast paint should give them a nice shine. So we've got some gold on our palette. Just get some onto our brush, and we're just going to paint the star all over. And paint the baubles as well. So we painted all of the areas gold, and now we're just going to apply some Reikland fleshshade gloss on all the stars. Now we don't want to get this on the baubles because we're going to be using contrast over those. So you just want to put this over the stars. Just be careful not to apply too much around these stars here, because you don't want to get any on that white fur-lined coat. Just want to get some on the star as well. And for the baubles, what we want to do is get some Blood Angels Red contrast onto our brush. I'm just going to paint that over the gold. Now what this will do on top of that gold is it will dry quite translucent, and the gold will shine through the red, making it look like it's made of glass. So that's the red one done. Just going to clean our brush and then get some orc flesh contrast. What we want to do is just pop that over this one down here. And pop some on this one as well. So for the next step on the stars, we're going to get some Liberator gold onto our brush. Just going to layer it over the top. Of that wash we did on the Retributor armour. And make sure you just leave some of that wash around the edge for the definition. And now to finish the stars off, we're just going to give them a highlight of Stormhost silver. So you want a nice point on your brush here. And all you want to do is just paint the real tops of those lines there. Just to make it look like it's shining really brightly. So now that all the stars and the baubles have been painted, we're going to be moving on to the naughty and nice list that's hanging off his belt, and we're going to paint the wick on the stick of dynamite in his pocket. For this, we're going to be using Contrast Skeleton Horde. But before we do that, we're going to tidy all the areas up with Corax White, because we have been painting a lot of areas around these parts, and I'm sure we've got some paint on those areas. So we're just going to double check all the areas around here, just make sure we've got no other colours on the parts that we want to paint our skeleton horde with. Just tidy those areas up. So now that Corax White is dried, we're going to go to our skeleton horde contrast. We're going to load some up onto our brush, and we're just going to apply this over all the areas that we want to be skeleton horde. So now that the skeleton horde is dried, we're going to be focusing on these branches up here. So for those, we're going to be painting them Caliban green, and then we're going to give them a highlight of Waaagh flesh. So I've got some Caliban green on our palette. We're just going to pop some on the end of our brush, and we're just going to paint all these parts of his makeshift Christmas tree that he's made. Might need a couple of coats of the Caliban green just to cover up that white. Just want to apply that on there nicely like that. So now that the Caliban green has dried all over those branches, what we're going to be doing is getting some Waaagh flesh. Just going to get some on our detail brush, and what we're going to do is just pop some on all of the raised areas, just to give it a bit of a highlight. So for the next step on the Red Gobbo, what we're going to be painting is his teeth. So we're going to give them a base of Morghast bone. We're then going to use some contrast skeleton horde just to get some definition, and then we're going to give them a highlight of Ushabti bone. So we've got some Morghast bone on our palette. I've watered this down with a touch of water. Now you just want to be very careful here not to get any of this on that green skin that we've painted. So now that our Morghast bone has dried on the teeth, we're going to get some skeleton horde. And we don't need a lot of this, we're just going to paint it all over the teeth. So now that the skeleton horde has dried, what we're going to be doing is just highlighting each of those teeth with Ushabti bone. So you'll need a fine detail brush for this part, and what you want to do is just pick out each of those teeth, just give it a little highlight. Just so they stand out nicely. So now that the teeth are complete, we're going to work on the lenses on the goggles, and we're going to work on this little fairy light up here as well. So what we're going to be doing is painting those with a base of Stormhost silver, and then we're going to go over them with contrast achromatic blue. So we've got some Stormhost silver on our palette. Just going to get some onto our brush. And you want to be very, very careful here and just paint those on the lenses. Try not to get any on the flesh. Paint those on those lenses there, and for the fairy light we're just going to paint this all over. So now that the Stormhost silver has dried, we're going to get some achromatic blue onto our brush. We're just going to drop this into the goggles. So just like what we did with the baubles earlier on, the contrast on top of the silver will make them shiny and make it look like they're lighting up. So now that the achromatic blue has dried over the silver, the lenses and the fairy light look really cool. So the next part we're going to be doing is the hardest part on the model. We're going to be painting the candy cane effect on the gun, on the stick of dynamite, and on his medal just there. So for this we'll need Flesh Tearer's Contrast Red. You need a fine detail brush with a good point. I'm using my Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 0 for this job. And what you want to do is get some contrast onto your paint. Now you don't need too much, but you want to maintain that nice point at the end of your brush. And what we're going to do is, with a very steady hand, we're going to paint lines on the gun. Now you might find yourself adjusting where you hold the model, and because of the curvature on the gun, middle of the lines can turn out quite thick. But that's okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to keep going over those lines until we get a nice consistent thickness across all of them. So you just need to take your time, don't rush. So now that we've painted all the candy stripes on the gun, the medal and the dynamite, I did go over with some Corax white just to tidy those lines up, but these are all complete. So all we need to paint now are the sack and the ammunition crates, and then the rim around the model, and I think he's ready for Christmas. So for the sack at the back, we're going to be painting it with contrast Wyldwood, and then we're going to be giving it a dry brush of Baneblade brown. For the green ammunition crate, we're going to be painting that Caliban green. We're then going to give it an all over wash with Waaagh surf shade. We're then going to give it a highlight of Waaagh flesh, and then we're going to give it an extreme highlight of Deathguard green. And for the brown ammunition crate, we're going to paint that Doomball brown. We're then going to give it a wash of Waaagh surf shade, and then we're going to highlight it with Scrag brown. So after painting all the crates and around the base, the Red Gobbo is now complete. So he's ready to set out on Christmas Eve to deliver all of those grenades to all those pesky primaries who haven't been very good this year.